At first, it seems as though they've moved on, easily smiling photos, hands entwined with someone new, moments of false happiness that make it look as if the past never existed. From a distance, you quietly wonder, did I ever truly matter? But the truth is, a narcissist never replaces you. They only replay the same script with a different face, the same promises, the same cycle of idealization and devaluation. What they call a new beginning is nothing more than another escape from silence, from emptiness, from themselves after losing the only person who ever truly saw them. They believe you can be replaced because they never actually saw you. They didn't see your soul, only the reflection of the light you carried. The validation, the attention, the emotional stability they could never generate on their own. You were the anchor in their chaotic world, the place they clung to so they could forget for a moment the void within. When they left, they thought they were reclaiming control. What they didn't understand was that you were the only thread keeping their false self from collapsing. And so, the same cycle repeats. The mask slips, the illusion fades, and the new person can't fill the space you once held. Because what you gave was never drama or illusion. It was substance, presence, living energy offered unconditionally. And what is real cannot be replicated by pretense. This isn't a story about revenge or karma. It's the raw truth of human psychology. Those who fail to honor the light are destined to live in darkness. The narcissist's greatest mistake wasn't losing you. It was believing that the kind of love you gave could ever be found again. They never will, because that love didn't come from their world, but from yours, deep, awakened, and irreplaceable. Part I. The illusion of replacement. A narcissist always believes that people are interchangeable. In their world, affection is not connection, it's transaction. Every relationship is a source of energy to consume, a stage to sustain the image of themselves they've so carefully constructed. When a relationship ends, they don't perceive loss, they see inconvenience. And like an addict, they rush to find a new dose, believing that as soon as they secure a new supply, the feeling of power and adoration will return. What they don't realize is that they aren't replacing you, they're recreating their own emptiness. In the early stage, they dive headfirst into a new relationship, performing happiness and convincing themselves that everything is fine. They post pictures, declare love, and offer the same familiar charm as if repeating an old, successful formula. But every smile, every promise, every glance carries a truth they don't want to face, the growing artificiality of it all. The thrill they once felt with you doesn't return, because it was never born of love. It came from how they were reflected in your eyes. The new person doesn't reflect them at the same frequency, not as deeply, not as authentically, not with the same patience that once fed their illusion. In psychology, this mechanism is called ego reinforcement cycling. They don't love people. They love the emotional reactions others create in them. When you admired, cared for, and forgave them, each gesture became fuel for them to feel worthy. And when you left, what they lost wasn't you. It was their ability to feel that they deserved to exist. So they replace you not to love, but to fill the void created by their fragile ego. Carl Jung once said, "One cannot see their own darkness if someone else is carrying it for them." In this case, you were the one carrying their shadow. You absorbed their anger, healed their insecurity, and kept the chaos balanced. That's why they believed they could live without you. But when you withdrew your energy, they were forced to face the emptiness you once filled. They thought finding someone new would fix it, but the harder they try, the wider the void becomes, because what they're searching for isn't out there, it's within. The illusion that everyone is replaceable is the perfect disguise for the narcissist's deepest fear, the fear of their own emptiness. They don't know how to connect, they only know how to mimic connection. They don't know love, they only imitate its appearance. And so they repeat the cycle endlessly: seek, capture, devalue, discard, then seek again as if trying to prove they still have control. But what they don't see is that each replacement costs them another piece of their soul, while you, the one who escaped the circle, are gradually reclaiming yours. If there is one truth every narcissist must face, it's this: nothing born from depth can ever be replaced. And you, the one who loved them with genuine presence and unconditional compassion, are living proof of that. Part 2. When the mirror breaks. When they left, they expected you to crumble. They were used to the version of you that always reacted, always tried to understand, always held on. But this time, when you stayed silent, when your eyes no longer searched for them, when your heart no longer begged, something inside them began to tremble. For the first time, the mirror that once reflected them was gone. They no longer had anyone to confirm their existence. And that was the beginning of a collapse they could not control. In Jungian psychology, the relationship between the narcissist and the empath is the encounter between the persona, the mask, and the shadow, the darkness. You were once the light that reflected the best parts of them, the goodness they wished were real. They saw themselves through your compassion, through your faith in them, through the patience they never had. That light made them feel alive, but it also terrified them, because the brighter the light, the more visible their darkness became. And instead of facing it, they chose the easier path, destroying the mirror. After leaving, they tried to rebuild the mirror with someone new, believing that by replicating a few familiar gestures, compliments, affection, admiration, the old illusion will return. But soon they realize the reflection is distorted, stiff, and lifeless. The new person doesn't know how to keep rhythm with their soul, doesn't know how to soothe, doesn't know how to listen. The artificial world they've built starts to crack in subtle places in the quiet moments, when there's no one left to perform for, no one left to blame. It's in those silences that the darkness they once fled begins to pour back in. They grow restless, irritable, confused. Everything seems to be going according to plan, yet nothing feels good anymore. They blame the new person, then the circumstances, then you, but deep down they know they've lost something they can't name. It isn't love they miss. It's the feeling of being seen as someone who mattered. You once gave them that through your gaze, your calm presence, your unconditional kindness. And when you stopped reflecting them, the false self began to dissolve like smoke. This is the moment Jung called narcissistic collapse, the breakdown of the ego. When the mask cracks, everything repressed rushes to the surface. Shame, fear of being forgotten, fear of no longer being admired. All that they once ran from now returns in silence. And the irony is, you, the one they devalued and discarded, were the last person who ever made them feel human. But you have changed. You are no longer a mirror for someone else's shadow. You've learned to see yourself without needing validation, to love without needing proof, to exist without serving as anyone's supply. While they frantically search for your reflection in others, you've turned inward toward the inner light that never went out. That's when the balance shifts. The one who thought you were replaceable realizes that they are the one who cannot be replaced. Not because you need them, but because they cannot exist without the person who once showed them who they were. The mirror has shattered, and for the first time they are forced to face what they feared most all along, themselves. The part 3, when they face their own darkness. After the mirror shatters, the narcissist enters what Jung called the dark night of the soul, an empty inner space where all external noise fades, leaving only the echo of their own voice. With no gaze to reflect them, no attention to sustain their ego, they begin to feel what they've spent their whole life avoiding, the meaninglessness of their own existence. With the new person, they expect to regain the familiar sensations: admiration, control, validation, but they don't. The more they try to recreate the illusion, the more exhausted they become, like actors repeating a play long after the audience has left. Every word, gesture, and look feels hollow because no one truly believes the performance anymore. In that emptiness, the narcissist falls back into their familiar spiral: anger, irritability, suspicion, followed by a dangerous stillness. They can't understand why the new supply fails to make them feel alive the way you once did. They thought replacing you would be enough, but what they are facing isn't outside of them. They are colliding with the very shadow you once shielded them from. And when there's no one left to blame, no one left to save, the truth begins to surface. They have never loved anyone, not even themselves. That silence after loss is the most terrifying thing for a narcissist, because within it there is nowhere left to hide. They begin to realize that no matter how many new people come and go, no one makes them feel whole. Everything they touch feels empty, because within them lies a bottomless void. When they were with you, it was your energy, your calm, your compassion, your forgiveness that temporarily filled that emptiness. But now, with no light left to reflect, they are forced to confront a brutal truth. There is nothing inside but fear and shame. This is when the darkness in them begins to speak. It whispers the things they've always denied, that people didn't leave because they were betrayed, but because they never knew how to hold anyone with real love. That what they called power was only the fear of being forgotten, disguised. That they are not victims, but prisoners of their own ego. And for many narcissists, this is the point where they either completely collapse or desperately seek another target to manipulate just to avoid looking within. But this time, unlike before, you are no longer a place they can return to. Your silence is proof that the circle has closed. While they struggle in isolation and shame, you are on a different path, the path of awareness. You no longer fight to be seen. You simply see yourself. You no longer try to convince anyone to understand. You live authentically, even if no one does. That is where the balance of power reverses. They sink deeper into their own darkness while you rise out of it. Carl Jung once wrote, "Darkness does not disappear by fighting it, but by facing it." The narcissist has never dared to do that, but you have. And that is the deeper reason they can never replace you. Because your love was not a reflection that made them feel special. It was a mirror that forced them to see who they really were. When you walked away, they didn't just lose a person, they lost their last chance to meet themselves. Part I. When the empath awakens, after walking out of that storm, you realize that silence is no longer a reaction, it's power. You once believed love meant patience, redemption, and healing, even for those who hurt you. But then you understood. True love is not about carrying someone else's darkness. It's about seeing them clearly and still choosing to keep your own light intact. When the relationship ended, you didn't just lose a person. You lost the illusion that you could save someone through kindness. And the moment that illusion shattered, your soul began to awaken. There is a strange stage where you're no longer angry, yet not entirely at peace. Everything feels quiet, no drama, no longing, only the steady breath of someone learning to stand without needing a reason. That's when the old self dissolves and a new awareness begins to form. You start to see the mechanism of your past relationship not as tragedy, but as an energetic lesson. You understand that you weren't drawn into the cycle because you were weak, but because your heart could feel depths others couldn't reach. And when you withdraw that energy, everything around you becomes transparent. The words that once hurt you now sound like echoes from a room you no longer live in. The narcissist assumes that when you're silent, you've lost. But they don't know that your silence is the ritual of your soul's rebirth. You begin to reconnect with the parts of yourself they once stole your trust, your peace, your intuition. You no longer seek validation because you finally understand that the one who must believe in you is you. You stop living to be understood and start living to be authentic. Healing doesn't come from the apology they'll never give, it comes from no longer waiting for it. In this phase, you also realize something deeper. Pain was the doorway through which your consciousness expanded. Through suffering, you learned discernment. Through loss, you understood value. Through darkness, you discovered how powerful your light truly is. Jung called this process individuation, the union of the denied and the awakened parts of the self. And that's what makes you a sovereign empath, one who not only feels deeply, but also knows boundaries, one who not only loves, but chooses who deserves that love. Meanwhile, they, the ones who thought they could replace you, now face a reality they can't comprehend. Why you no longer react, why you no longer need to prove, why you are so calm. They don't realize that you're not pretending to be strong. You are strength itself. Your love has transcended their realm of control and become something untouchable, not because you closed your heart, but because you opened it in a different direction toward yourself. When the empath awakens, the cycle ends. All manipulation, illusion, and power games lose their grip because there's no one left to play. You didn't defeat them. You outgrew their entire game. And that is the only victory an empath ever truly needed. Freedom. Part V. The greatest mistake of the narcissist isn't losing you, it's failing to recognize who you truly were while they still had the chance. They believed your love was guaranteed, your kindness endless, your forgiveness a form of weakness. They became so accustomed to taking that they mistook it for entitlement. What they never understood was that every time you forgave them, you weren't lowering yourself. You were offering them one final chance to see their own humanity, and they rejected every single one of those chances. When they walked away, they thought they had won. They had someone new, an audience, attention. But that victory was hollow, built entirely on illusion. They believed they could replace you, only to realize that what they lost wasn't just a relationship, it was an energetic frequency they would never encounter again. The new person might be beautiful, exciting, easier to control, but no one makes them feel illuminated the way you once did. No one challenges them to face themselves, and no one is deep enough to touch the last remnants of their soul. They've met many people, yet none who have truly seen them. They once thought they could play with emotions, never realizing that emotion is the language of the soul. Every time they lied, manipulated, or devalued someone, they weren't just harming others, they were eroding their own capacity to love. That is the real punishment, to live without ever truly being alive. On the surface, they may keep smiling, laughing, and performing, but inside they are nothing more than an echo reverberating through an empty room. The price of not valuing light is to remain forever trapped in one's own darkness. Meanwhile, you, the one once dismissed, discarded, misunderstood, have become living proof of a simple, universal law. Nothing real is ever lost. It simply leaves the place that no longer deserves it. Your light was never extinguished. It merely withdrew, purified, brighter, and ready to be given where it belongs. You no longer need to be seen, because you have seen yourself. And that is something the narcissist, no matter how many relationships they pursue or years they live, will never comprehend. Their greatest mistake was believing you were just a chapter in their story, when in truth they were only a paragraph in your awakening. They thought they were the center, but you were the message. You are the evidence that kindness is not weakness, but wisdom, that silence is not defeat, but understanding, and that love does not always mean staying. Sometimes, love is knowing when to walk away. And one day, among countless faces they desperately try to use to fill the void, they will see a glance, a gesture, or a smile that reminds them of you, and that pain will never fade. Because when they finally realize that the only person who ever truly loved them is the one they lost, it will be too late. You will no longer be there. You will have crossed to the other side of pain, where peace has become power, and the past is only a mirror reflecting a lesson long completed. That is the final paradox. They once believed you were replaceable, yet you, the one they treated as temporary, have become the only thing in their life they can never have again. One day will come when you no longer need explanations, apologies, or recognition. You'll stand quietly in the middle of life, look back, and realize what once hurt you the most was exactly what led you home to your true self. You are no longer the wounded one, nor the survivor who overcame. You are simply someone who understands that love cannot exist where there is no consciousness, that not everyone is capable of seeing the worth of an authentic soul, and that sometimes silence is the final language of self-respect. The narcissist will keep repeating their cycle, chasing light through new faces, trying to rebuild the illusion that already collapsed. But no matter how many people pass through their life, they will never find you. Because you were never just someone to love. You were the doorway to awareness, the lesson they lacked the courage to learn. And by the time they realize that, you'll already be somewhere else in a place where peace no longer needs to be proven, where kindness no longer asks for permission to exist. You didn't defeat them, and you don't need revenge. You've conquered the weakest part of yourself, the part that once believed you had to be seen to have value. Now, you are the light, not the kind that craves admiration, but the kind that knows exactly where to shine and when to withdraw so it can't be used. Your silence isn't the end. It's transformation from someone once drained by misplaced love into someone strong enough to love without losing themselves. Their mistake was thinking you could be replaced. Your victory is realizing you never needed to be compared to anyone at all. In a world full of illusions, you have learned how to be real, and nothing and no one can ever replace a soul that has awakened.